eat foods high in carbs, it's easy to overdo it, take in too many calories, and gain body fat in the process. But that doesn't change the fact that things like bread, pasta, and potatoes taste really good. And if you deny yourself these kinds of foods, you will crave them sooner or later. So rather than restricting, we can drastically reduce carb consumption by making some simple substitutions that not only save calories and help you burn fat, but they also taste just as good as their high carb counterparts. And first, let's start with a zero carb bread substitute, since I know that bread is something that many people struggle to reduce and limit. Well, luckily there's something known as cloud bread, which not only tastes great as a bread substitute, but it also typically contains half the calories as regular bread, much more protein, and basically zero carbohydrates. It's made with only 3 main ingredients: eggs, cream cheese, and cream of tartar. You would separate 4 eggs into yolks and egg whites, then blend the egg white portion with half a teaspoon of cream of tartar until it becomes thick. And in another bowl, you're gonna blend the egg yolks with 3 to 4 tablespoons of cream cheese, a teaspoon of oregano, and some garlic and salt. Then you would mix both together very gently to keep as much air in the mixture as possible. Finally, you would scoop the mixture and create 8 to 10 evenly sized buns, placing one at a time onto an oven tray lined with non-stick parchment paper. Once you're done baking that at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about half an hour, you should have 8 to 10 delicious, fluffy, zero carb slices of bread that you can use as a substitute for sandwiches or anything else that you would normally use bread for. Another carb that many people want to be able to enjoy is rice. And the good news is you can very easily replace rice with cauliflower rice for a virtually carb-free alternative. While 1 cup of rice will have around 45 grams of carbs, 1 cup of cauliflower will only have about 5 grams of carbs. Also, 1 cup of regular rice will have 205 calories. Meanwhile, 1 cup of cauliflower rice will only have 25 calories. That means you'll take in almost 90% less calories with only 3 grams of net carbs by simply switching over to cauliflower rice instead of regular rice. And it's really easy to make. You can either use a food processor, a grater with medium-sized holes, or a regular kitchen knife to chop the cauliflower into rice-sized pieces. Once that's done, you can press the cauliflower rice between 2 paper towels to remove any excess moisture. But you don't have to do that. Really, all you have to do is just saute the cauliflower rice on a frying pan with a small amount of oil for 5 to 10 minutes, or alternatively, you can also steam it for about 5 minutes. You can also add whatever seasonings and sauces you would normally use when cooking regular rice, and it'll taste just as good, but you'll be saving a ton of carbs. Next, let's talk about a high carb food that's used for so many things like lunch wraps, tacos, burritos, and quesadillas: tortilla wraps. And after trying many healthy alternatives like Ezekiel wraps and lettuce, I've realized that most substitutes either don't taste that good or they break and fall apart. Until I found cheese wraps, which basically have 0 carbs. Not only do they taste good and have much more protein, but they also save you a lot of carbohydrates and overall calories as well. One cheese wrap contains around 110 calories with only 1 gram of carbs. Compare that to a typical tortilla wrap, which has 210 calories and anywhere from 35 to over 40 grams of carbs. This also doesn't take into account the fact that you don't have to add cheese since it's already in the wrap. You would just add a protein source like chicken and then add things like tomatoes, lettuce, onions, avocado, and salsa. The best thing is that you won't even notice that the tortilla isn't there, and your wrap won't fall apart like other alternatives. Moving on to the next one, let's say that you want a delicious burger right off the grill, but you're trying to budget your carbs, and you don't want to take the time to bake cloud bread. What can you do as an easy replacement for your buns? Well, it turns out portobello mushroom caps are perfect for this, and even if you don't like mushrooms, I recommend at least trying a portobello mushroom burger because all the flavors combine together in a way that makes it taste just like a cheeseburger, especially when you use a grill. The portobello bun is also my choice over other messy low-carb alternatives like using avocado halves for buns. You would just take 2 portobello mushroom caps, wipe them off, spray each side with olive oil cooking spray, add salt and pepper, and grill them for 2 to 3 minutes on each side. If you don't have a grill, you can also oven bake them for 10 to 12 minutes instead. When combined with a burger, cheese, tomato, and lettuce, you'll be blown away because it'll taste as good as a regular burger, but unlike a burger bun that'll have around 150 calories and almost 30 grams of carbs, the 2 portobello buns will only have 8 calories and 1 gram of carbs. Next, we have mashed potatoes, which can once again be prepared with mashed cauliflower, and as long as it's made correctly, you won't even know the difference. When comparing half a cup of potatoes to half a cup of cauliflower, we find that the potatoes have about 60 calories and 13 grams of carbs, while the cauliflower has only 14 calories and 2.5 grams of carbs. So the cauliflower can help you take in 4 to 5 times fewer calories and carbs than the potatoes. To make them correctly, you just want to keep a few things in mind. First of all, try to use the florets only and avoid using the stems, or else the texture won't really feel the same. Then cook the cauliflower in boiling water for 5 minutes or until it's soft. Then strain the cauliflower and push down on top of the strainer with some paper towels to really get as much water out as possible. And from there, it's pretty much the same as mashed potatoes. You mash the cauliflower, throw in butter, garlic, salt, and either heavy cream or coconut milk from a can and mix it all together. Now, an almost calorie-free replacement for pasta is kelp noodles. They're obviously made from kelp, which is an algae-based sea vegetable that has many positive health benefits that even offer cancer-fighting properties. Kelp noodles only have 2 other ingredients besides kelp, and that's water and salt. And for a 4-ounce serving, they only contain 6 calories and 3 grams of carbs, 1.5 of which is dietary fiber. To give you a comparison, a 4-ounce serving of spaghetti will have about 160 calories and 35 grams of carbs. Now, the texture is different from regular pasta, if you eat it straight out of the package, that is. If you eat them without cooking them, they're gonna taste crunchy, which is great for a salad. But if you want them soft as a pasta replacement, you would soak them in hot water, lemon juice, and salt for 20 to 30 minutes. This will make the noodles match the texture of regular noodles. Another replacement for pasta is zucchini. By simply getting a spiralizer, you can make homemade zucchini noodles for a fraction of the calories and carbohydrates. Even though zucchini noodles aren't carb-free, they're way better than regular pasta, and many of you will like the taste and texture much better than the kelp noodles we just talked about. While 2 cups of pasta provides almost 500 calories and a whopping 90 grams of carbs, the same amount of zucchini noodles only contains about 70 calories with 4 grams of fiber and only 8 grams of net carbs. After spiralizing the zucchini, you can eat it raw, but it'll taste more like pasta if you saute it for 1 to 2 minutes and then add a low-carb sauce. One of my favorite low-carb dishes made out of spiralized zucchini is pesto zucchini pasta. Let's move on to something crunchy that you can have instead of potato chips or as a replacement for breadcrumbs to save a lot of carbs. Pork rinds are not only very high in protein, but unlike other crunchy snacks, they're also very low in carbohydrates. Plain pork rinds will have 0 grams of carbs, and even barbecue flavored pork rinds will only have around half a gram of carbs per serving. The 2 to 1 protein to fat ratio is also very good. When compared to regular potato chips, we see that potato chips have about the same amount of fat as the pork rinds, but they also have 15 grams of carbs per serving as opposed to 0. And if you throw them into a blender or a food processor with some Parmesan cheese, you can create your own very tasty carb-free breadcrumbs that can be used to bread chicken or pretty much whatever you want. Speaking of Parmesan cheese, this is another one of my favorite carb-free replacements for chips and crackers. Parmesan cheese crisps have become more and more popular and are now available in most supermarkets. But even if you can't find them, you can make your own by simply scooping 1 tablespoon of Parmesan cheese at a time and placing each scoop onto parchment paper, and then baking it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 to 5 minutes or until golden and crispy. These crisps have almost 0 carbohydrates and a 1 to 1 protein to fat ratio. Now, as far as dairy-based recipes that call for milk, you can replace that with unsweetened almond, cashew, or coconut milk. Most people don't realize that even if you get low-fat or skim milk, you still wind up getting about 9 to 10 grams of carbs per cup. On the other hand, unsweetened almond milk, for example, contains only 1 gram of carbs, which as a milk substitute is as close as you're going to get to 0. But the problem is that you may want it to taste a little sweeter, or you may have a recipe that calls for sugar. And one of my favorite replacements for sugar is stevia. Stevia is a natural sweetener and sugar substitute that contains 0 carbohydrates, 0 artificial sweeteners, and it's essentially calorie-free. It can be used for baking, for tea, or for anything that you would normally use sugar for to provide that sweet taste. And many studies show that substituting sugary foods and drinks with calorie-free sweet alternatives lowers calorie intake and assists with weight loss. According to the evidence, stevia and even other artificial sweeteners are considered safe when the maximum recommended amount isn't exceeded. So a couple packets of stevia per day or simply using it as a sugar substitute in your baking is totally fine, and it can help you save a significant amount of carbs and calories. Nori sheets are another almost zero carb food that can be used in combination with cauliflower rice to make a practically carb-free sushi. You would just need a sushi mat and some other ingredients like salmon, avocado, and vegetables. Nori sheets can also be used to make simpler sushi without the rice, or it can also be cut into slices and cooked in an oven with some olive oil to make crispy nori chips. Going back to pasta, another option to replace grains that I've talked about before is shirataki noodles. An 8-ounce serving contains only about 20 calories with 0 net carbs. Meanwhile, the same amount of regular pasta would have as much as 300 calories with 56 grams of carbs. On top of the fact that shirataki noodles are low in calories, the calories come in the form of insoluble fiber, which is why you end up with 0 net carbs. When you eat insoluble fiber, you end up taking in fewer calories in the form of carbohydrates. This is because this type of fiber doesn't get absorbed the same way. You only absorb about 1.5 calories per gram of insoluble fiber compared to the 4 grams that you would absorb if you were eating soluble fiber or a starch base instead. So this means that for an 8-ounce serving of shirataki noodles, you'll effectively only end up with a net intake of 7.5 calories. And now moving on to a snack that contains more than 100% of your daily requirements of vitamin A, C, and K, we have kale chips. They also have almost no carbs, especially when the fiber is disregarded. To make them, you simply need to mix 1 cup of kale leaves with 1 tablespoon of olive oil and a pinch of salt. Then place the pieces of kale on a baking sheet and bake the kale for 10 to 15 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Once they're done, you'll have a low-calorie snack that's full of healthy nutrients. So those are 14 replacements that you can use to substitute other high-carb foods if your goal is to reduce carb consumption. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel.